I'm really happy that I get to talk about this show today. Dollhouse is one of my favorite shows. It was pure, uncut nihilism. It was perfect. In the world of Joss Whedon and his art, Dollhouse was, it was his apocalypse now. Oh, mwah, I fucking love it. It's the best nihilistic art I've ever seen in my life. I think that the three best things that Joss Whedon ever did. Top three: Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 3 and Dollhouse season 1 and Dollhouse season 2. It is a show where you can hyperfixate and analyze every single episode because every single episode has so much thought, has so much psychology, so much philosophy, so much postmodern momentum. And this is Joss Whedon, the philosopher. This is truly just such a remarkable show that made an infinite number of statements about the self, about how anyone can happen, not just anything, anyone can happen. About bodies. Bodies are things that Joss Whedon has been obsessing over since Buffy. What are bodies? What is the soul? Is there a soul? Is there some kind of like, is the soul measurable? Is the soul even actually there? Like, who are you? You're something that is programmed by culture, by society, by your parents, by your friends, by the way you look. Uh, there is no such fucking thing. We are all dolls. At my most nihilistic, I wish that I was an active. I wish I was a doll. I wish I lived in the dollhouse. I wish I could surrender to that kind of blissful nihilism. But part of the larger point is that everyone's a fucking doll. Who is anyone? All you are composites. All you are, yes, the sum of your parts, but what is the origination of those parts that make up the sum? It's just conditioning, it's programming, it's brainwashing, it's coercion. The human experience in late stage capitalism is coercion. Hell, forget about capitalism for a moment. This show does investigate the sadism of mega corporations and scientific institutes. But even if you removed all of that, which the show kind of does remove all of that, the human dilemma of the human experience is that life itself is not really all that real, which makes which redefines reality and experience itself. Dollhouse is really interesting because it might be Joss Whedon's only true Muse project, and it came about in a way that is kind of completely inverted, right? Normally, a filmmaker or an artist will come up with a story and pitch it to the Muse, whereas in this situation, Eliza Dushku famously brought Joss Whedon out to lunch. They ate some Gouda pizza, and Eliza Dushku said, I want you to make a show for me. Like, if you could create the perfect show for me, what would it be? And Joss came up with Dollhouse, but that's essentially the muse, the model, commissioning the artist, which isn't normally what you get. And Joss Whedon clearly loves Eliza Dushku. And Eliza Dushku is clearly his muse. And what he sees in Eliza is like really interesting. And Eliza, by the way, is phenomenal on Dollhouse. An incredibly sophisticated performance, and half of the show is based on how hot she is, and she is really that hot. She's amazing. She's amazing on the show. An incredibly sophisticated role, and Joss tried to do a lot of experimentations and a lot of postmodern and nihilistic expressions through her character, through Echo or even Caroline. He tried to study. He tried to study the black heart of nihilism and find those sweet yet morbid moments that are still pulsating within it, that are still providing its beat, that are still the sweetness of nihilism that still pumps blood to the body. That, in spite of everything that's wrong with the world continues to hope, um, often fruitlessly. Hope. Dolls or actives are people who volunteer to for 5-year terms to become almost glamorized sex slaves, right? They are imprinted with personalities and provide the ultimate fantasy for a lot of people. But since it is the elite, a lot of these engagements are sexual in nature. And Joss Whedon, every time he puts an active, especially Eliza Dushku, especially Echo, whenever she assumes a new personality, the show itself often assumes a new structure, a new structural framework. It can go from romantic comedy to espionage to serial killer to love story to war to like a deeply intimate character study of a person who's not really there, who doesn't actually exist. Like the show itself, along when the characters become different people, the show itself can become a different sort of show with a different structure and a different melody, a different structural melody or beat that Dollhouse and has to honor from that point on, because Dollhouse is a true fairy tale in that sense. And for everything sweet that is expressed on Dollhouse, there is a darkness that is intimately bonded to it. And this show has so many sweet moments. I think that Topher Brink is, along with Faith from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Topher Brink is one of the most interesting characters Joss Whedon ever created, and Faith and Topher, those are my two favorite characters Joss Whedon ever wrote. Those two characters are phenomenal to me, are wild to me. Topher, of course, is the tech genius who imprints all of the dolls and uh, is definitely sociopathic. He might be the most sociopathic character Joss Whedon ever invented, and I love him so much because there's a sweetness to him, but that sweetness is always intimately bonded with, with something unbelievably psychotic. Fran Kranz does an incredible job, an incredible performance with him. The best scene of the entire show, and maybe skip ahead the next minute of this if you don't want to be spoiled, because I'm trying not to completely ruin the show for people who haven't watched it yet. Like skip ahead a minute, I would say. The best scene of the entire show, and it's probably the best scene Joss Whedon ever wrote, and I think that Joss says this is his favorite scene on the show, and it might even be his favorite thing that he ever wrote. um, it's a scene I don't want. It would take so long to set up all of this. So if you're watching right now, I'm just taking for granted, or I'm just assuming that you watched the show. Saunders is trying to force herself on Topher and is cruelly humiliating him. And Topher created her basically. He has this beautiful delivery of like, "I didn't make you hate me. You chose to. You're human. Don't flatter yourself." It is such a beautifully intimate scene that plays with concepts of God, that plays with concepts of nihilism, that completely surrenders itself to nihilism, but through the tableau, through the structure, through the writing, through the composition, it marries itself to the unique sweetness of nihilism, because nihilism is honest, nihilism is purity, nihilism is unescapable, inescapable, nihilism is true. And characters like Dr. Saunders and Topher are truly deranged and deeply lonely. There's a metacontextual nature to the show as well, of course, because I feel like Joss wrote this for Eliza and had a very deep insight into what makes that actress think, what makes his muse tick, and he was able to express that through the different kind of personas that he'd have Eliza take on. And the metacontextual nature also can extend itself to like Joss Whedon. All people who make television shows, they're basically Rossum. Like they run dollhouses. They take these actors, they put them into these scenarios and situations, um, and create these narratives to fulfill a certain kind of fantasy of an audience, of a person who wants to view the material. A lot of people want to view this show, and they want to view Topher Brink as Joss's analog, as Joss's stand-in, much like Xander was on Buffy. But having watched and listened to commentaries, right, like watched interviews and listen to commentaries with Joss Whedon, he comments on that. And he's like, no, I honestly think I'm more Adele, and I honestly would have to agree with him. Because there is this role of leadership, and there is this constantly living within the gray area. And what we know about Joss Whedon as a person is that he is incredibly problematic, and what we know about Adele the character is that she is positively cruel, psychotic, and she's also a shepherd. And she's also someone who is deeply caring, but someone who has been so morally compromised that the only accurate way to describe her is evil. And yet, she is shepherding in a lot of people who need help, who need guidance. She is molding these fantasies. And she even steps up to try to save the world. But the first thing to describe Adele DeWitt has to always be evil. And there's no way around that. And if that's Joss Whedon's analog as that's what's posited by Joss Whedon himself, and I think that that's a huge vulnerability of his. He's being incredibly vulnerable in Dollhouse, and I think he's confessing to an awful lot, especially if he's writing himself through Adele, as he claims. People are complex. The show is sophisticated. Everybody has like multiple facets of themselves. Like Echo and Alpha, these kinds of characters like evolve and have all these different personalities within them. But like, who do you think you are? You are an amalgamation. You are an entire composite. You're the same way. And a problematic person, just like the sweetness of nihilism, a problematic person has righteous things intimately bonded to his personality, to his makeup as a human being. For every sweet part of nihilism is intimately associated with a morbid part of that, a dark and deranged and disturbed and demented part of that. And I think that's pretty cool and ultimately revealing. Oh my God, Eliza Dushku so fucking sexy, yo. Like, no woman has ever looked hotter and has ever like no one's ever been sexier than Eliza Dushku on Dollhouse. It's just been so amazing. Summer Glau was amazing on this show. Summer Glau and Amy Acker, two Whedon alumni, two Whedon alums, uh, both are phenomenal on the show. I think that Saunders or Whiskey is also like just such a fascinating character. I loved her to death. I guess spoilers too for the next 10 seconds. Skip over this. Don't watch this part if you haven't watched it yet. But Bennett Halverson, Summer Cloud's death in season 2, that shot through the brain after being like, "You think Topher really likes me?" Oh my God, it was the most brutal fucking death I've ever seen. It was fucking amazing. All right. I keep giving these spoiler warnings because not a lot of people have watched this show. People will worship Buffy and study it like in academia until the end of time. People loved Firefly, loved it so much, but Dollhouse gets lost in the shuffle, and I personally feel like Dollhouse is more interesting than Buffy and Firefly combined. I think it's more sophisticated. I think it's more nihilistically confrontational, which I think makes it more honest. Because if I'm looking at Joss Whedon's career, it's an existentialist who is trying as hard as he can to find an antidote to the Sartrean nausea of of human existence, of the absurd dilemma of the human condition, trying to find an antidote to the nausea. And I think he does provide one, but by providing an antidote to nausea, um, he had to surrender entirely to nihilism. And by Dollhouse, which would come after both Firefly and Buffy, because Buffy is like a steady progression. It's not until like the end of season 5 and season 6 where I think Joss becomes a true nihilist. And Firefly, although it's probably his most optimistic show, it is also his most reactionary. And Serenity is one of the most bleak and depressing films I've ever watched. And Firefly is still incredibly nihilistic. Pay attention to River Tam. Pay attention to her when you watch Firefly, and you'll realize just how cosmically nihilistic that show is. Yeah, he left the frameworks of Sunnydale High School to spread nausea to the galaxy, or spread nihilism to the galaxy. But nausea is also a very apt thing to say there as well. And Dollhouse, this is why I call it his apocalypse now. It's his grand nihilistic odyssey, his grand fairy tale of nihilism. And he doesn't care about giving nihilism a glow up. He doesn't care about holding back. It is a true, pure, uncut, and entirely high octane and intense exploration and study and showcase of full frontal nihilism. It's explicit. It is all encompassing. It's the most pure example of nihilism that I can think of. I think that Dollhouse is fascinating. It's a fascinating television show. uh, and structurally, compositionally, like you are affected, like internally, like you are moved on the inside. And when you watch a really good episode of Dollhouse, it's so unique, and it makes you feel a way that you've never felt before. Especially, like I've watched a lot of media, nothing makes me feel so uniquely moved as a great episode of Dollhouse, which, by the way, is almost every single episode of Dollhouse. It deeply moves me in a way that I can't articulate because I've never seen something that was like or similar to Dollhouse and its total effect. Like I've never seen something that moves me in quite this way. I'm not saying it moves me um in a way that's deeper than anything. I'm saying that it moves me in a way that no other thing has. So I'm lacking the vocabulary to really kind of describe and articulate exactly how Dollhouse makes you feel because it was that original. It was that unique, and dare I fucking say it, innovative. It was so innovative. I'm seeing nihilism being brought into the framework of American television, and it plays into every trope of American television, especially Fox network television. And nihilism bonds itself to that to the situational, to the situations, to the composition, to the conventions of American television, to all the cliches and tropes of it, and it bonds with that kind of feeling of familiarity. But like we said, everything nihilism bonds itself to, there is a darker association that is attached to it, right? So it nihilism intimately connects seamlessly, effortlessly with the conventions of American television, but by bonding to it, nihilism also deconstructs and corrodes it. It levels it. It blows it up. Nihilism is a freeing thing because nihilism is destructive. Nihilism is self-destructive. Nihilism frees you. However gothic, dark, and morbid you can take that statement, I want you to take it in the most depressing way possible. Nihilism is freeing because of how self-destructive it is. Because if you apply nihilism to a television show, the television show itself becomes self-destructive. And a television show that becomes self-destructive, like an active becoming conscious, becoming sentient, evolving, completely changes the static being of television, in the way that we know it, and morphs it into something more dynamic becoming. I'm telling you, Dollhouse is doing some extraordinarily sophisticated things. I love it so much. I love it deeply. I do consider it to be like Joss Whedon's masterpiece. It's gonna definitely be off-putting to a lot of people, and it was a bit unfriendly to a lot of viewers out there because it's not playing the game that Buffy was. It's not playing the charisma tactics that Firefly used. This is Joss Whedon just being completely unafraid, and I think super courageous. And he was at the point in his career where I think he had enough confidence and he had enough of a name so that he was able to do something that was deeply troubling. And by being deeply troubling, it was also liberating. The show itself, making it, I think must have been one of the most stressful things ever because, you think you're gonna get canceled like every week. Um, they had to completely trash the pilot. They made a pilot and the network was like, okay, let's do something like a little bit more accessible. So like Joss Whedon does play ball. But every single show does this, like since time immemorial. Studios and actually Joss has talked about this, like studios and their restrictions. The best art is either made under total freedom or its opposite. And I've always thought this about television shows. And Joss Whedon's shows are no different. Dollhouse, I think, it's a miracle of a show for me personally. It's high art. It's the highest possible art that you can get from network television. And I think that when taking it all in, um, by absorbing everything that Dollhouse has, I think that Dollhouse is the most fascinating show ever made. That doesn't make it the best show ever made, because I think that part of Joss's determination, part of his goal, was to completely destroy television as a structure by exposing the structure itself and by allowing the very like meta-contextual frameworks of television, just like the actives within the show, just like Echo, to become weaponized. And nihilism weaponized will always ultimately be self-destructive. It's very freeing. And just like the fact that Eliza's name is Echo, she's an echo of every personality that was within her. A television show, a trope is an echo of every time that trope was used. A cliche is an echo of every time that cliche was reproduced. A rerun is an echo. Everything that we do are echoes, right? Like let's go pure nihilism with it, because I think Joss and Eliza was a producer on this show. Like she's the reason this show exists, because she told Joss to make me a show, and he came up with Dollhouse. Eliza is just as much a force, a creative force behind this show as Joss Whedon was. So let's include her because Eliza's a genius, and she's also my dream girl for life. Thank you, Joss, for putting her in a leather dominatrix outfit. My life is now complete. But Echo, we are all Echo. Everything that I say to you right now is an echo of like the neural pathways that those thoughts had to travel in order for me to articulate them. Everything we are echoes. Like, we are not immediate. There is no immediacy in life. Like, there's no grand meaning either. Meaning itself is the echo of a question. The very nature of the human origin story is an echo. Every great human accomplishment is an echo of an equally great human failure, and vice versa. Nothing is immediate. Nothing is, as you would truly call it, genuine or authentic, because authenticity is immediacy. But all we see of each other are the echoes of who we used to be. Does that make us any less real? I mean, maybe in a postmodern sense, linguistically, like language, fuck language. We are all echoes. That's all we are, and all we will ever be. And that's fine, because echoes are musical when there's enough of them. Echoes form an ensemble. That's what echoes do. I love this show more than I love almost anything. Anything. And I was shown this before I really started like analyzing television or whatever. I was shown this by an ex-girlfriend of mine, and God, it was so cool. It was so cool. Like it's it has stayed with me. I'm stuck to this show. It's bonded itself to me, and there's always a darker attachment involved. I loved the intimacy of Dollhouse. I love the love stories of Dollhouse. I love that basically, I love that every single episode I can ruminate and meditate and think about them for hours on end. A phenomenal television show. And I'll never get over it. Like, who could get over spending that much time with Eliza Dushku? Who could? Who could get over spending any amount of time with Eliza? She's perfect. She's the perfect center of this show. She's the perfect star. Like, she's so heroic. And I think that Echo, as this like nihilistic symbol, is so powerful to me. I think that I learn a lot from Echo. Like about the nature of like who I am, the nature of society, the nature of who we all are. The answer isn't as simple as like we are all nothing or we are all everything. No. We're all everything we've ever been. Nihilism isn't that simple. It's deeply sophisticated, it's complicated, and there's a lot of anger with it. Self-destruction is a very angry thing to go through. But there's never been any revolution worth a damn, that wasn't self-critical or self-hating. When I watch Echo on this show, like, she is so perfect, like physically, mentally, intellectually. Like, she's so stimulating that like Joss has like transposed or translated his muse, his fantasies of Eliza into, I think, the ultimate antidote for the nausea of human existence. The ultimate antidote for the nausea of me looking at this laptop and then imagining each part of this laptop as its own inanimate piece, meaningless and yet completely full of some kind of conjoined meaning. Me looking at every part of my body and my body itself as a container, a compartment. For what? If a soul doesn't exist, then it's just an empty container. And it's just a container that holds nothing but experience. Because experience, you can measure experience. Trauma, you can measure trauma. Psychologically, you can measure trauma. And it's echoes, echoes, echoes. You can measure that. That's quantifiable. You can qualify it. Eliza as the antidote to the nausea of the human experience. Echo as the nausea of the human experience. Echo herself is a character that suffers from nausea the more evolved that she gets. She has these massive migraines, and yeah, she experiences nausea, like literally experiences nausea. She cuts the head off the snake. She destroys a massive corporation. She targets the source of the nausea, of the manipulation, of the testing, of the experiments, of the cruelty. She targets the source of it. She destroys it. A clean slate's never a clean slate. You always see what was there before. The antidote to nausea is found in the echo of nausea itself, in the composite narrative of meaninglessness and meaning, being intimate with all the extremes of the human condition. Clearly, I'm obsessed with this show. More people need to watch it. There needs to be like more worshippers of this show. Come on, Buffy and Firefly don't deserve all of the love. Dollhouse. This. Make fucking Schopenhauer blush. Like, it's so good, guys. And Eliza, I would die for you. No questions. I don't need to know the context. I would die for you, Eliza. Happily. I gotta stop this video. Alright, I think that's it, though. Thank you very much for watching my video about Dollhouse.